Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm not in Disneyland anymore, sadly. I was there last weekend. I vlogged the whole thing. I'll leave the links to that playlist down below. While I was there, I was taking a bunch of notes on my phone. I will link below where I got this case as well because I get a lot of questions about it. And I was starting to take notes on all of the things about Disneyland that are different from Disney World and vice versa, because I know this is something I was super interested in before I went, and I found it hard to find something that was just like a definitive list. So keep in mind, this is just one woman's opinion. It's just one person. Everyone has their like favorites, but this was what I took away as being different. Let's get that off. Whoa. It's hot in here, guys. There's no air conditioning in here yet, and that ring light is hot. So we're gonna talk about how Disneyland and how Disney World are different in terms of the overall vibe, the rides and attractions, guests, and cast members. And again, one woman's opinion, but this was my experience. So in terms of the vibe, I would say that Disneyland is like a city. Walt Disney World is a suburb. Walt Disney World is 4 theme parks that are all driving distance from one another. And at Disneyland, you have 2 theme parks that are just facing each other, walking distance. In terms of acreage, I looked it up and you could fit almost 60 Disneylands into the space that occupies the whole of Walt Disney World Resort. So at Disneyland, all of Disneyland Resort encompasses Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, Downtown Disney. They all face each other. To give you guys some perspective, to walk from the back of Magic Kingdom to the front, if you were really hustling, would probably be like 15 minutes to just navigate through people. To get all the way from the back of Disneyland to the back of California Adventure, you could probably do it. I think I did it in 20 minutes one day when I really had to hustle to get to California Screamin'. So it's walkable. The nearest hotels to the main gate of Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure aren't actually owned by Disneyland. They are on a street called South Harbor, and some are directly across the street from a footpath that will get you to both parks' entrance in a 3-minute walk. I was able to get, you know, from my hotel, which was the Best Western Anaheim Inn, nothing fancy, but the location is amazing, and I could get from there through the line, through security, and into a park in like 15 minutes. And most of that time was spent just getting through like security lineups, so the walking really wasn't any of it. Some people, I've heard them say that this makes Disneyland feel less magical. That really wasn't the case for me. Even though, you know, on the way to get to the park, it's a 5-minute walk, but you're walking by a Denny's, or you're walking by a homeless person, or you're walking by, you know, people selling like tacky souvenir stuff. You're still staying in a hotel where pretty much everyone else there is staying there to go to Disneyland. So it's really like the other guests that make you feel like you're in Disneyland, even though you don't get that like I'm in the Walt Disney World bubble feeling where it's like nothing is interfering with the magic ever. This I found for Disneyland makes a huge difference, especially with the nighttime spectaculars. If you're there watching fireworks or you're there till park closing, you don't have to think about the stampede all the way down Main Street to get to all the buses and trying to get there in time to get the first bus back to the hotel before it fills up and you have to wait for a second. That was actually awesome. For about, I think I paid like $220 a night for a hotel. I said again that was like kind of decent but not amazing. That's about the cost of a moderate hotel at Disney World at full price, where you would need to take that bus system, and at Disneyland it's 5 minutes to the park. That I found to be amazing. You get proximity that even none of the deluxe resorts at Disney World can promise you. So that's what I mean by it feeling like a city. It really is walkable. The other thing is that Disneyland feels like a park where you get to be a little bit more spontaneous. In part, this is because they're still on the paper fast pass system. So, you know, you get your paper fast pass, you can plan ahead, but it's not like you're booking your passes out like 60 days in advance. Restaurants are less reservation focused. With the exception of the Blue Bayou that's next to Pirates of the Caribbean, it's not like Disney World is, where it's like people are, you know, reserving their restaurants months and months in advance. It seemed to me that most people were just walking up and getting in. The other thing I noticed was that there are character sightings versus bookable meet and greets. And I remember going to Disney World in Florida as a child, and you would just kind of see characters around, wandering, and you get to meet them that way. And now it's shifted very much to a system where, you know, there's a signpost with all the times the character will be there, or you can even book fast passes to go and see them. And I found at Disneyland, and I'll talk about why I think this is a little bit later, but you know, you just stumble upon characters and meet them that way, and I thought that was really cool. Overall, the vibe is just a little bit more spontaneous at Disneyland. It's all walkable, and I found that, you know, Walt Disney World is all about the planning. Nothing there really, if you've gone a couple of times and you know really what you get out of planning, is spontaneous. So, I mean, that's a positive and a negative, right? It's fun to be spontaneous sometimes, but I miss being able to just book fast passes and show up. Next, rides and attractions. So Disneyland has a greater density of rides than Magic Kingdom, even though it's about the same size. And I'll tell you, and again, I'm looking at this because I have a lot to get through, which rides are kind of similar. So there are rides that at least share the same name or are even identical. The first one is Space Mountain. Space Mountain at Disneyland is a two-seater. At Disney World, you know, it's more of the bobsled setup, and it is completely different in both parks. The music is different. At Disneyland, it pipes music in through the ride itself. At Disney World, there's a lot of noise coming in, like this ambient noise. At Disney World, Space Mountain feels very like rickety. You can tell you're on a metal track, it just feels older. At Disneyland, it's still, you know, you're still getting rattled, but it doesn't feel like it's the track or the vehicle that's doing that. It feels like it's like sharp turns that are still kind of smooth. The lineup and exit is not as cool as at Walt Disney World. At Walt Disney World, and this is a fun Disney fact, when you go in and line up for Space Mountain, you're actually going underground so that it doesn't have to interfere with like the building of the ride. You just go underground and wind your way up, and it's dark, and there are like these little interactive games you can play, and then when you exit, you know, you're taking this moving sidewalk out past a green screen and seeing yourself on screens in outer space. It's much more involved. At Disneyland, it's a much simpler lineup. You line up actually on the outside on top of the building. Yeah, and the exit is pretty much just like a set of stairs. So I don't know, it's really a matter of preference as to which version of Space Mountain you like prefer. I've heard the best one is at Disneyland Paris, and I would say I love them both, but because I'm so sentimental about Space Mountain at Disney World, that one probably would be my favorite. Next are Splash Mountain and Thunder Mountain. I would say that they were almost identical, though Thunder Mountain seems to be way better maintained at Disneyland. And this was a rumor I'd heard before I went, that the rides at Disneyland are better maintained, and I found that to be true. I don't know, I found at Disney World sometimes Thunder Mountain is looking a little bit rough, and at Disneyland it was like pristine. Every element of it was working. It was fantastic. Next up is Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland is longer. You get 2 drops going down instead of just, I think you get 1 at Disney World. Somebody left me a comment saying that the reason you get 2 drops at Disneyland is because you need to go underneath the railroad, and I thought that was really cool. You kind of immediately, you know how the boats load up on It's a Small World at Disney World, where, you know, you're kind of in this room and all the boats are going together? Very similar at Pirates, where you're in a room, the boats are all kind of going together, and they don't pace them far apart. At Disney World, I find they let one boat go and then they'll wait a little while. So, you know, you can kind of see another boat ahead of you in the distance, but at Disneyland, I found they run the boats pretty close together, so you don't get that feeling of like we're a lone boat in a big set. That was another thing that was different. I find at Disney World, the scale of Pirates of the Caribbean feels huge. It's like you can't really get a sense of when the ceiling ends or when the scene in front of you ends. At Disneyland, it felt smaller scale and more intimate, and it was actually kind of cool because it means that the animatronics and all of the effects just seemed to be closer to you. Like they were very close to the boat, as opposed to Walt Disney World, where it feels like very grand, but everything's a little bit further away. Haunted Mansion. So really where Haunted Mansion is different between Disney World and Disneyland is that the outside of the buildings are different. At Disneyland, the design is really much more like Southern Gothic, and it looks like a big old mansion. There's no next gen, you know, graveyard that you walk through when you press buttons and hear noises and water splashes out. The line is just pretty straightforward. You walk up to the front of the house, you wait outside the side of the house. It feels like you're getting a little bit closer to it. At Walt Disney World, the design of the mansion isn't southern, it's like Victorian, and you get a side entrance that's under canopies and through that graveyard. So it does feel a little bit like you're going in maybe through like the servant's entrance of a mansion versus just like walking right up to the front door like you do at Disneyland. The Disneyland ride is older, I believe, and it's not as well lit as the ride at Walt Disney World. I find at Disney World, it's like, you know, you can see everything clearly, even though it's supposed to be dark. At Disneyland, I found some of the effects just weren't like as bright. At Disneyland, I also found that the animatronics are closer to you. Like Pirates, the scale feels a little bit smaller, and so, you know, it gets closer. The other thing that's kind of cool is the stretch room in Disney World has the ceiling actually stretch out above you. At Disneyland, it was the first iteration and it's a real elevator. So the ceiling doesn't move, you go down, and you can tell you're going down. You can feel the little like click of the elevator. It was kind of neat. Next is Tower of Terror. That's at Disney California Adventure and at Hollywood Studios at Disney World. Really, it wasn't that much different. It's way wider at California Adventure, and the narration is more threatening and like ominous. The voice sounds scarier, but otherwise I found it pretty similar. Last ride I'll talk about is the monorail. At Disneyland Resort, this is really cool. The monorail has two stops. One of them is in Tomorrowland, right near the Nemo ride, and the other one is at Downtown Disney, which sits in between Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure. It also sits fairly close to, you know, all three of the Disney hotels, and especially close to two of them. So it's kind of neat because you get on the monorail, you know, stamp your way in, go through security, and bam, you're right inside Disneyland. Versus the monorail at Disney World is really, you know, through I think three of the deluxe hotels, and then out in front of the gate of the Magic Kingdom. So you still have to go through security and all that. It doesn't take you like right into the park. There's another monorail that's like taking you to the ticketing and transportation center. There's another one connected to that that goes to Epcot, but it's not, none of them take you like right into the park. They're really about getting from hotels or parking lots to the area in front of a park. So I got thinking about which attractions I've missed when I was at Disneyland. These were the ones that I kind of thought, oh, it'd be really nice if they had that here, because when I'm in a Disney park, I kind of want to be able to do it. The first one really was Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and that's new at Walt Disney World in New Fantasyland, and I just love it. It's like a next-gen roller coaster. It's not super scary, it's small, it's a kiddie coaster, it's a smooth track, but the effects are cool, and I love Snow White, and it's adorable. The next is Mickey's PhilharMagic. That's the 4G, show with the glasses. I think last time I was at Disney World, if you can see the vlogs, I'll link them below. I'm pretty sure I got pink eye from wearing one of those glasses, so I'm still taking some time to get into the idea of ever doing something with glasses like that again, but yeah. I love it. I love that it's just like a compilation of like favorite Disney classics and the music in them, and the visual effects are cool, and I love that they make it smell like pie during Be Our Guest, and I just missed that one. Next is Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios. I love that roller coaster, and I loved California Screamin', but like there's something about the cheesiness of an Aerosmith like themed roller coaster that I thought, man, I wish I were still about that right now. I wish that were available to me. Expedition Everest at Animal Kingdom is one of my favorite rides at Walt Disney World, and you know, I missed having that big coaster. The Matterhorn was broken when I was at Disneyland, so maybe the Matterhorn fulfills that like mountain coaster, you know, that's a little like more scary, where you're going on the outside of a mountain and you're really high up or something. Maybe that's where you'll fulfill that need, but I missed that one. And lastly is Spaceship Earth, not to be confused with Mission Space, which is basically like a nausea machine. But Spaceship Earth is the golf ball ride at Epcot, and you go up and it's like a journey through the history of communications, and I always just think that one's really sweet, and yeah, I kind of missed that. I missed Epcot. Whoa, shook the camera. I missed Epcot. I missed Epcot and the World Showcase, especially in general. I found at Disneyland and Disney California Adventure, you have two parks that are packed full of stuff, but I like how at Disney World, Hollywood Studios and Epcot to me both feel like a slower pace. A lot of the joy of them is like walking around, seeing, you know, people performing, and it's just more laid back. I find at Disneyland and Disney California Adventure, even though there are definitely places within both parks that are more relaxed and the overall vibe of the people there is a little bit more relaxed, I missed having that, like, you know, a park you can go to on an off day while you're on your vacation and just kick back a bit. Having been to both parks now, I think there are also a few attractions from Disneyland that I'm really gonna miss the next time I'm in Disney World. Indiana Jones was amazing. It lived up to what everyone said it would. Fun Disney fact, it's the same vehicles as the dinosaur ride at Animal Kingdom, but it is just amazingly themed. There's fire, there's the giant like boulder ball coming at you. There's, I don't know, the scale of it just feels huge, and I love that one, and I wish Disney World had that one. The Storybook Land canal boats, that's like, I don't know, I already feel nostalgic about that, and I've only ridden it once, but it's just like a little boat ride, and it's outside, and it's just really precious. It's kind of almost like a take on the old fair rides where it's like the Tunnel of Love where you go through, except this is outside and it's just little scenes from fairy tales, and I thought it was really, really sweet. A lot of people in the vlogs were talking about the guide that I got filmed Brian, and it's like, I agree with you guys. Brian had it going on. I feel weird saying that. I feel like Brian's like maybe 20. Maybe I'm a cougar now, but I just find it's like everyone leading those was really charismatic, and it was just lovely and sweet. I loved Alice in Wonderland. That was maybe like, ooh, should I say this? That might be my favorite dark ride. I don't know. I love Peter Pan, but I loved it. I loved it. It was like a beautiful combination of like old school dark ride and next gen dark ride, and you got to go outside, and it's just like, it's precious. I will miss that one. California Screamin'. I love that roller coaster. It's the first roller coaster other than Aerosmith that I've ever gone on that goes upside down. I'm not much of a like wild coaster gal, but I just love that one, and it felt really like an old boardwalk, and it was just lovely. It was exactly as scary as I could handle. Maybe I can handle a little bit scarier, but I just loved it. The last ride from Disneyland that I'll miss is the Monsters, Inc. Dark Ride. That was precious, and I just loved that it was Pixar, but it still felt really Disney, and it was like, it was lovely. So yeah, Disneyland definitely kills it on the dark rides, that's for sure. Disney World kills it on more of like the thrill rides maybe? I don't know. They both have their merits. Guys, I'm not really gonna have like a favorite here. I can see why everyone likes both parks for sure, and I like different things about each of them. Guests. I have read before that at Disney World, there's like 70% people from out of town, 30% pass holders or locals. At Disneyland, it's reversed. You have 70% pass holders or locals and about 30% of people who've traveled from further away. And I found that definitely held true. And that affects a couple of things. At Walt Disney World, you are surrounded by people that have the mentality of loving Disney so much that they're willing to devote a vacation to it. And not just like a couple of days, but a like flying from somewhere, bringing your kids, like spending a week there type of vacation. And because they're planning their trip around loving Disney, and because they're coming probably from out of state, the mentality is a little bit different. It is a little bit of more of like a do or die mentality, where everything you want to do on a Disney trip, you have to do this time, because who knows when you're going to be back again. I found at Disneyland, it was much more the mentality of someone where if they didn't get to do everything this time, it's okay, because they're gonna come back next weekend or next month or sometime this summer or next year. It doesn't all have to be done on this one day. At Walt Disney World, there's a really big emphasis on merchandise. There are signs through stores that say things like only 3 per customer of Vera Bradley items or something like that. I found at Disneyland, people were not as merchandise obsessed. probably because they're there more often, so there isn't that same sense of I have to get it now or I'm not going to get it. I also saw at Disneyland a lot more of customized clothing, a lot more like Disney bounding or custom ears ordered off Etsy, or you know, custom vests. They have these like Disneyland gangs, or they're technically called Disneyland social clubs, and it's really cool. It's all people who love Disneyland and go together in the same group, and they kind of have uniforms or jackets or pins. I thought that was pretty cool. At Walt Disney World, if you're there, you'll notice most people are there with their families, and there seem to be a lot of military families, and that makes sense because they have a special resort called Shades of Green, where members of the military and their family can stay at a slightly, you know, more discounted rate than say like a deluxe resort, but it's still a really fabulous place to stay, or so I've heard. At Disneyland, it's much more like families, but also couples and groups of friends. They have the social clubs like I mentioned, and there just aren't as many babies and infants at Disneyland for some reason. And I was there on a weekend during a busy time of year, but it seems like at Disney World, there's a lot more like really, really young children. At Walt Disney World, there are a lot of Southerners, a lot, and a lot of Easterners too. At Disneyland, one of the things that struck me right away was there's a lot of locals. There's a lot of West Coasters, including Vancouverites. There's a lot of people from the desert, but overall it was like, where are all the people from the South? For me, going to Disney World is like synonymous with being surrounded by people from the South. And it's one of the things I love, because people from the South I find are like friendly and excited and like openly enthusiastic, and I don't know. I just associate Disney World with like being around fabulous Southern women whose like hair always looks amazing and who have like a bunch of Vera Bradley stuff. And that's not the case at Disneyland. I was like, where did all the people from the South go? Maybe it was the time of year I was there, I don't know, but that was just my experience. Overall, I found that people at Walt Disney World just wear their enthusiasm entirely on their sleeve. And there are definitely people who do at Disneyland, but it doesn't feel like everybody is doing that. Disneyland, because it's so close to a major city, it's like, you know, it could be something you just went and did for a day. Because Disney World isn't close to a city as large as Los Angeles, it's close to Orlando, it's like, it just doesn't, it has that vibe where everyone there is so excited to be there because they've saved and they're spending their week of vacation there, and it's like just a very different kind of a feeling. The last thing I'll get into is cast members. And I know this is like, again, one person's opinion, but I think I'm being pretty objective here. Cast members at Disneyland Resort walk to work in costume. I've never seen that at Disney World. You'll see it like sometimes if someone's costume is like a tour guide costume or something like that, but not from like different sections of the park. Like at Disneyland, you can straight up see people in their like Tower of Terror elevator, you know, elevator doorman or whatever costume. At Disney World, you would just never see that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. For me, it doesn't like spoil the magic. I get it. It's like people are driving in, they want to park their car and just walk in and not have to think about a change room and stuff like that. But it was definitely different. It's funny when you're walking along South Harbor and you see someone in like a full costume. Like not, you won't see like a Cinderella, but you'll see like people who are working like operating rides in their costumes. It's pretty cool. There are not as many college program cast members at Disneyland. There are way more locals, and they still love Disney because obviously they wanted to come and work there, but they don't uproot your whole life and move to Orlando, love Disney. So it's just kind of different. I also overheard a lot of like Disneyland cast members talking about things that didn't have anything to do with Disney. I feel like whenever I overhear a cast member conversation in Orlando or in Disney World, it's like Disney related, but I was hearing things about like the Mayweather fight recently and stuff. And so it just seemed a little bit more laid back and a little bit more focused on like, you know, youth having their summer job at Disneyland versus, you know, Disney World, it's like, I moved here after the college program and I love it so much. It was just a different kind of a vibe. Overall, I will say I loved both parks. They each have their merits. I would gladly go back to either one of them. I think which one you go to, at least which one you go to first, should really come down to what's closest to you. If you're traveling from outside of America, I would say go to Disney World because it's bigger. You'll have a week's worth of activities to do. If you could only see one, go to that one because it's enormous and it's, you know, super easy to get to from Europe. And you'll get to see Epcot and there's just more to see there. If you've been to Disney World and you have the opportunity to go to Disneyland, I would say go. I loved it. It was classic. It's the park that Walt walked through himself. You can still see his old apartment that he had built for himself there. They keep a little candle lit for him all the time, and it's like precious. But yeah, I would say I just love them. Loved them both. They're just different, but they're both awesome. And I don't really have one that I prefer, but I do have, you know, one that feels more like home. And I think that's Disney World because I grew up going there, but I think the one that feels like home will just be the one you've been to the most. And they both are awesome. And if you can, if you're lucky enough, go to both. And if you can only go to one, know that you're still having an amazing, amazing experience because both are awesome. Leave me a comment below. Do you agree with this stuff? Do you disagree? Are there things that I missed? Let me know. I love talking about Disneyland and Disney World, and now I feel like I know a little bit more. I would get comments from people who were talking about Disneyland and it was always so interesting, and I finally got to go and it was awesome. I love you guys. I will see you guys later. Bye-bye. Have a magical night though.